Alright, so the FA Cup final is coming up soon, with Man United playing Chelsea, but let's take a look at the worst players to start an FA Cup final since 2003, with the only catch being that I can only use one player from each side. Peter Enkelman. If you needed any more of a sign that the 2008 FA Cup final looked more like a playoff final than an FA Cup one, it was the sight of Peter Enkelman taking his place in goal for Cardiff City, a man who'd been banished from the Premier League since somehow allowing a throw-in to end up in his own net while at Aston Villa, a man who barely scrambled 12 caps together for Finland throughout an illustrious career of bench warming and making his own fans feel nervous. He was actually Cardiff's third lone goalkeeper of the year in 07-08 after future Premier League winners Kasper Schmeichel and Ross Turnbull, who, let's face it, should probably have given his medal back. Emerson Boyce, Barbados' finest. To be fair, Boyce was a decent seasoned, hard-working pro for Wigan. He devoted 9 years of his career to the Laddicks. Still doesn't mean the man had much pace or defensive nous when faced with tricky forwards. Still though, respect where it's due, the former Crystal Palace man somehow managed to lift the FA Cup in 2013 when faced with a forward line of Carlos Tevez, Sergio Aguero and David Silva. Although how Jack Rodwell was brought on before Edin Dzeko is probably one of numerous reasons why the manager was sacked practically the next day. Ollie Lusney. Considering the 2003 FA Cup final was between Arsenal and Southampton, and yet this list won't feature any Saints players, I think it just says a lot about Ollie Lusney. Look, he wasn't a terrible player, but the Ukrainian was certainly a letdown for the Gunners, never really stamping his place on the Arsenal team. This was his final game before moving to promoted side Wolves, who were doing their summer shopping at the home of washed up big names. Clearly QPR did not heed that word of warning. Matt Lawrence. I shouldn't be too hard on Millwall. They didn't have a prayer against Manchester United in the 2004 FA Cup final. They just had to hope Dennis Wise pissed Roy Keane off enough to get him sent off, or that Tim Cahill would smack his head onto any number of hopeful punts into the box. None of that happened, and they were easily swatted away 3-0. Took United 11 years to win that cup again, and who says that club don't value the FA Cup, huh? Anyway, Matt Lawrence, average defender, spent 6 years in Millwall, never ventured into the top flight, and retired 3 years ago at Burgess Hill Town. No doubt regaling everyone about that time he lost and failed in a duel against Ruud van Nistelrooy some nearly 15 years ago. Andy Wilkinson. I'm just digging out hard-working pros now at this stage. Andy Wilkinson spent his entire 15-year career at Stoke City. After breaking through at Stone Dominoes, which just sounds like a dodgy takeaway service, Wilkinson has played in an FA Cup final against Man City and lost, and in the Europa League, achievements that by all rights should not be on the CV of a man who belonged in the Championship at best, but just got swept along for the Tony Pulis ride of Funhouse Mirrors in Glenwhelan. John Otaka. This guy left England with an FA Cup winner's medal. I'm still trying to work that one out, considering what a brutal signing he was. £7 million Portsmouth paid in July 2007. He scored against Derby County, but do those ones really count? And then nobody else for months before he started against Cardiff in the FA Cup final. He was on a reported £80,000 a week, and the club couldn't get rid of him until 2011, after relegation of course, and we wonder why that club have practically snapped themselves in half ever since. Jamie OHara. I know the rule is one player from each team, but this is the Portsmouth side which got to the 2010 FA Cup final, so still holds up. Avram Grant had Portsmouth scuttling through the trapdoor into the Championship, so to get them to the FA Cup final was very impressive, but as always it was a dodgy penalty that spoiled the final for that man. Some things never change. As for Jamie OHara, it's 8 years later and he's a 31-year-old reality TV star at Billericay Town. Nigel Rio Coker. Another man who was supposed to be tipped for big things was Nigel Rio Coker, seconds away from lifting the FA Cup with West Ham in 2006, and then Steven Gerrard spat all over his picnic with a last-minute screamer. Rio Coker now struggles to get on the MK Dons bench at 33 years of age. Charles Inzaghi. Remember when Charles Inzaghi wanted to leave Newcastle for a Champions League club? Didn't quite work out for him, that one, did it? The closest he got to a trophy was when he stared at Arsene Wenger lifting it in the 2015 FA Cup final after his team had battered Aston Villa 4-0, with Inzaghi performing his usual party trick of wandering around the pitch like a spineless fish. He's been without a club for 2 years, not even Sunderland wanted him. Connor Wickham. Alan Pardew should have known not to celebrate too early in 2016 FA Cup final against Manchester United. Sure, Connor Wickham was still on the pitch. Not going to be scoring too many goals with that inanimate beanpole up top. Remember when he was at the centre of a bidding war between England's top clubs when he was a teenager? What were they thinking? Matty Fry. And finally, to round it off, Matty Fry. On his day, he wasn't a bad player. Leicester City will still think fondly of him, but lining out against Arsenal in the 2014 FA Cup final, it was like the gods were shining down upon Arsene Wenger and saying, if you can't be that, just renounce your contract and retire now. Fryatt had scored just 2 goals all season for Hull. He's since scored 10 in the 4 years since. He's recently retired due to injury.